Parents demanded I surrender my master bedroom in the house I fund, all for their golden boy. They secretly packed my things, so I handed everyone a strict 24-hour eviction notice. I am Harrison. I am 26 years old, and for the last year, I have been living a life that most people would call pretty successful, but honestly, it has felt like a slow-moving trap. I work as a software engineer. I make a very comfortable six-figure salary, which is great, but it also painted a giant target on my back when it came to my family. About a year ago, I bought a house in the city. It is not some ridiculous mega mansion, but it is a really nice, solid 4-bedroom house. And I mean I bought it. My name is the only one on the mortgage. I pay the property taxes. I pay the homeowner's insurance. I pay for the electricity, the water, the high-speed internet, and practically every grain of rice that comes through the front door. When I bought the place, my parents, Victor, who is 55, and Sylvia, who is 52, were living out in a rural town. They had just retired and were constantly complaining about being bored, about how far away the hospitals were, and how isolated they felt. So, like the good son I was raised to be, I offered them a lifeline. I told them they could move in with me. They would not have to pay rent. They could just relax, enjoy the city, and live comfortably. Looking back, I did not just do it out of the goodness of my heart. I did it because of this deep, ingrained sense of duty. Call it the sunk cost fallacy of being the responsible child. You keep investing time, money, and effort into your parents, hoping that one day they will look at you with the same unconditional pride they reserve for your sibling. I set the house up perfectly. The first bedroom is my master suite. It is my absolute sanctuary. It has a private bathroom and a large walk-in closet, which I love. The second bedroom went to my parents. It is spacious, gets great morning light, and they loved it. The third bedroom is my home office. I work from home about 80% of the time, so I invested heavily in this room. We are talking high-end ergonomic furniture, a dual monitor setup, a heavy-duty server rack, and acoustic panels. It is where I make the money that keeps the roof over our heads. The fourth bedroom is a small spare room. It barely fits a queen-sized bed and a nightstand. It is basically just a crash pad for a weekend guest. For the first few months, things were incredibly peaceful. Victor and Sylvia spent their days gardening in the small backyard or going for walks in the city parks. I worked in my office. We had dinners together. I paid the bills, and they paid me in smiles and the occasional home-cooked meal. I genuinely thought I had figured out the perfect family dynamic. I thought I had finally earned my spot as the reliable, successful son. But the foundation of this peaceful house was built on a very fragile illusion. Because in my family, peace only exists when my older brother does not need anything. To really understand what happened next, you have to understand my brother, Cameron. He is 28 years old, but mentally, he operates like a teenager who just got his first allowance. Cameron is what you would call the golden boy, though I prefer the term professional victim. Growing up, Cameron was always the one with quote-unquote bad luck. If he failed a class, it was because the teacher had it out for him. If he got fired from a job, it was because the manager was toxic. Nothing was ever his fault. And my parents, especially my mother Sylvia, bought into it completely. They spent their entire lives acting as Cameron's personal safety net. Meanwhile, I was the quiet kid who just figured things out. I got the good grades. I secured my own scholarships for college. I never asked for a dime. You would think that would make them proud, right? Wrong. In a weird, twisted way, my independence actually worked against me. Because I did not need them to survive, they focused all their emotional and financial energy on the son who did. I remember this one specific incident when I was 19. I had worked 2 terrible summer jobs, saving up every single penny to buy a cheap, reliable used car so I could commute to my college classes. I had almost $3,000 saved in a joint account my mom still had access to. 2 weeks before I was going to buy the car, Cameron managed to total his own car by driving way over the speed limit. It was entirely his fault. He had no insurance. I woke up the next morning to find my savings account almost empty. My mother had transferred the money to Cameron so he could buy a replacement vehicle. When I confronted her, Practically in tears because my hard work was just erased. She did not even apologize. She just looked at me and said, "Harrison, you are so smart and capable. You will figure it out. Your brother needs this for work. He is struggling. You have to be strong for the family." That was the running theme of my life. I was not allowed to have needs because Cameron's needs took up all the oxygen in the room. My success was just a resource for them to mine whenever Cameron ran into trouble. I thought buying this house and moving them in would finally change the dynamic. I thought that by becoming the literal provider, the dynamic would shift. I was the head of the household now. But old habits die hard, and to Sylvia and Victor, I was still just the bank account they could tap into when the golden boy inevitably messed up again. I just did not realize he was about to mess up right on my front doorstep. It was a beautiful Tuesday morning. The sun was shining, the coffee smelled great, and I was sitting at the kitchen table answering a few emails on my phone before officially starting my workday. Victor was reading the news on his tablet, and Sylvia was making toast. It was the picture of domestic bliss. Then, without missing a beat, without even changing her tone of voice, Sylvia dropped the bomb. She set a plate of toast down and casually said, "Oh, by the way, Harrison, your brother Cameron and his wife Fiona are going to be moving in with us for a little while." I stopped chewing. I literally froze. I looked up at her, waiting for the punchline, but she was just spreading butter like she had told me it might rain tomorrow. "Wait, what?" I asked, my voice tight. "What do you mean moving in?" Sylvia sighed, that heavy, dramatic sigh she always used when she was about to play the victim card on Cameron's behalf. "Well, things are just really hard for them in their town right now. Rent is too high, and Cameron's hours got cut again. Plus, Fiona is pregnant. The baby is coming in a few months, and they are incredibly stressed. They need the help, Harrison. They need family." I felt a massive spike of panic in my chest. "Mom, you cannot just invite people to live here without asking me. This is my house. I pay the mortgage. There is barely enough room." She waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, do not be dramatic. We have that fourth bedroom. It is just sitting there empty. It will just be for a few weeks, maybe a month or two, until they get back on their feet. It is family, Harrison. We cannot leave a pregnant woman out in the cold." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her to pick up her phone and cancel whatever plans they made. But I hesitated. That was my fatal flaw. I was hit with a paralyzing mix of guilt and shock. The word pregnant completely threw me off balance. I did not want to be the monster who refused to help an unborn child. And she used that magic phrase, just for a few weeks. Before I could form a coherent argument to shut it down, my dad chimed in. "Just let them stay, son. It will be fine. Keep the peace." I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache coming on. "When exactly are they coming?" I asked, already feeling defeated. Sylvia smiled, a bright, completely unapologetic smile. "Oh, they're actually already on the highway. They should be here by lunchtime." They had not just planned this behind my back. They had already executed it. I was not being asked for a favor. I was being informed of a hostage situation in my own home. Cameron and Fiona arrived at exactly 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I was in the middle of a coding sprint, but I could hear the sheer volume of their arrival from down the hall. I walked out of my office to find the living room completely buried in cardboard boxes, trash bags full of clothes, and random pieces of furniture. This did not look like a temporary stay. This looked like a permanent relocation. Cameron came through the front door carrying a massive flat-screen TV. He did not say hello. He did not say thank you. He just grunted, dropped the TV near the sofa, and said, "Man, this city traffic is a nightmare." Fiona walked in right behind him. She was 26, a few months pregnant, and carrying absolutely nothing. She looked around my clean, carefully decorated living room with a critical eye, like she was a health inspector judging a cheap diner. "So this is it?" she asked, her voice dripping with disappointment. "Yeah, this is it," I said, leaning against the hallway wall. "Welcome." My mom immediately rushed over, fussing over Fiona, asking if she was tired, offering her water. I pointed to the fourth bedroom at the end of the hall. "You guys are in there. It is small, but it has a bed." Fiona waddled down the hall, peeked into the room, and immediately scoffed. "You have got to be kidding me. This is a closet. Where are we supposed to put the baby's crib? Where are my maternity clothes going to go? There is not even a real dresser in here." "It is a spare room, Fiona," I said, keeping my voice as flat as possible. "It is meant for temporary guests." She rolled her eyes and turned back to the living room. "Well, we're going to have to move some of this stuff out. That corner over there," she pointed to where I kept my expensive reading chair and a nice floor lamp, "that will be perfect for a baby playpen. And we will need to clear out those bookshelves to make room for the baby supplies." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted copper. They had been in my house for exactly 5 minutes, and she was already mentally redecorating my living space. Over the next few days, my quiet sanctuary evaporated. The smells changed. My house used to smell like fresh coffee and cedar. Now it smelled like cheap fast food and Fiona's weird pregnancy cravings. The noise level skyrocketed. Cameron apparently did not believe in headphones, and Fiona kept the living room TV blasting daytime talk shows from morning until night. My minimalist space was suddenly cluttered with half-empty water bottles, kicked-off shoes, and endless boxes that they refused to unpack. I tried to ignore it. I retreated into my office, put on my noise-canceling headphones, and tried to focus on my work. Just a few weeks, I kept telling myself. Just survive a few weeks. But the reality was, the invasion had just begun, and the physical space was only the first thing they planned to take. If the physical clutter was annoying, the financial drain was downright terrifying. I have always been very good with my budget. I know exactly how much I spend on groceries, utilities, and daily living. But within the first 2 weeks of Cameron and Fiona moving in, my budget was completely blown to pieces. I typically do a large grocery run on Sunday mornings. I would spend about $150, and it would easily last me and my parents the entire week. The first Sunday after they arrived, I went to the store. I bought the usual, plus some extra snacks. The total was over $300. I winced, but paid it. By Wednesday morning, the fridge was completely empty. I am not exaggerating. The premium deli meats, the fresh fruit, the expensive coffee beans I buy for myself, gone. I found the empty coffee bag in the trash. Cameron had used my premium espresso beans to make giant, watered-down pots of drip coffee. When I asked my mom where all the food went, she just shrugged. "Fiona gets very hungry, Harrison. She is eating for 2. You need to be more understanding." The next grocery trip, Fiona actually handed me a handwritten list. It was completely ridiculous. She wanted specific brands of organic berries, imported sparkling water, and expensive grass-fed beef. I looked at the list, looked at her sitting on my couch watching TV, and said, "Fiona, I am not paying for this. If you want specialty items, you and Cameron need to buy them." She instantly started crying. Real, loud, sobbing tears. Cameron stormed out of their tiny bedroom, chest puffed out. "Are you seriously yelling at my pregnant wife over some groceries?" he demanded. "You make 6 figures, bro, stop being so cheap. We are family." Instead of arguing with an idiot, I just walked away. I bought my normal groceries, but the problem was I could not put a lock on the refrigerator. No matter what I bought, they ate it. And it was not just the food. It was the resources. I watched my utility bills spike. Cameron would take 45-minute hot showers twice a day. Fiona would leave the air conditioning blasting while having the windows open. Then came the property damage. One afternoon, I left my $300 noise-canceling headphones on the kitchen island while I went to the restroom. When I came back, they were gone. I found Cameron outside in the backyard, wearing my headphones while doing some sort of messy woodworking project. He was covered in sawdust, and so were my expensive electronics. When I snatched them off his head, he got defensive. "Chill out, I just borrowed them for an hour." "You do not borrow my work equipment," I snapped, wiping the dust off the ear cups. He rolled his eyes. "You can afford 100 more of those. Stop acting like a rich snob." I realized then that in their eyes, my money was not a result of my hard work. It was just a communal pot of gold that they felt entirely entitled to. I was not a host, and I certainly was not a brother. I was an ATM machine that happened to live in the same house. The financial drain was infuriating, but the incident that truly triggered my emotional bankruptcy had to do with my work. My job requires a massive amount of internet bandwidth. I frequently have to upload large data packages and host secure video conferences with international clients. My home network is my livelihood, and I paid a premium for the fastest fiber optic connection available. It was a Thursday afternoon. I had a critical remote meeting with a major client to demonstrate a new software build. Everything had to be flawless. About 10 minutes into the presentation, right as I was sharing my screen, everything froze. The video feed lagged, the audio distorted into robotic garbage, and then the connection completely dropped. I scrambled to reconnect, my heart pounding. I checked my router diagnostics. Something in the house was pulling nearly 100% of the bandwidth. I practically ripped my office door open and marched down the hall. I slammed open the door to the fourth bedroom. Cameron was lying on the bed, his laptop open, a gaming console running, and a massive external hard drive plugged in. He was torrenting dozens of massive video game files simultaneously. "What the hell are you doing?" I yelled. "Turn that off right now. I am in the middle of a client meeting." Cameron jumped, looking annoyed rather than guilty. "Bro, knock first. I am just downloading some games. The internet here is supposed to be fast. You crashed my entire network." I reached over and physically yanked the Ethernet cable out of his console. "Do not ever use the hardline again. You use the basic Wi-Fi, and you do not download massive files during business hours." Cameron stood up, trying to physically intimidate me. "You cannot tell me what to do. I live here too." "No, you do not." I fired back. "You are a guest who is overstaying his welcome." The shouting brought Victor and Sylvia running down the hall. Instead of asking what was wrong, my mother immediately rushed to Cameron's defense. "Harrison, lower your voice. Do not speak to your brother that way." "Mom, he just crashed a critical work meeting. I rely on that connection to pay the mortgage on the house you are all sleeping in." My dad, Victor, stepped in with his usual spineless peacemaking routine. "Harrison, just calm down. Your brother is stressed. He is out of work, he is worried about the baby. He just needs to relax and play his games. Be the bigger man." I stood there, looking at the three of them. Cameron had a smug little smirk on his face. My mother was glaring at me like I was a villain. My dad was looking at the floor, refusing to make eye contact. Right there, in that cramped hallway, something inside me just died. It was the feeling of emotional bankruptcy. I realized that no matter how much logic I used, no matter how much money I spent, no matter how much I provided, I would never win. To them, Cameron's right to play video games was more important than my ability to earn a living. I did not yell anymore. I did not argue. I just turned around, walked back to my office, and locked the door. I managed to salvage the meeting by apologizing to the client, but for the rest of the day, I felt completely hollow. The passive-aggressive tension in the house was unbearable, but I did not know that the worst was yet to come. They had taken my peace, they had taken my money, and now they were preparing to take my actual physical space. Thank you so much for listening so far. Before we get into the crazy climax of this story, please take a second to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below telling me the name of the city you are living in. Every single comment helps push this video out to more people, and I really appreciate your support. Now, let's get back to the story. The tension in the house after the internet incident was thick enough to cut with a knife. For a few days, we existed in this terrible, passive-aggressive stalemate. I stayed in my office or my master bedroom, and they dominated the living room and kitchen. I genuinely thought the worst was over. I thought we had reached the lowest possible point of disrespect, and now we would just ride out the remaining weeks until they finally moved out. I was so incredibly naive. The entitlement had not peaked, it was just gathering strength for the main event. It happened on a Tuesday evening. I had just finished a grueling 10-hour workday. I was mentally exhausted, my eyes were burning from staring at lines of code, and all I wanted to do was take a hot shower in my private bathroom, order some takeout, and sleep. As I walked out of my office and headed down the hallway, Cameron and Fiona were waiting for me in the kitchen. They were sitting at the island, side by side, looking like a united front. It felt like a trap the moment I walked in. "Harrison," Fiona said, her voice dripping with that fake, sugary sweetness people use when they want something outrageous. "Do you have a minute? We need to talk to you about something important." I stopped. I did not sit down. I just leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "What is it?" Cameron cleared his throat, trying to sound authoritative, but just coming off as pompous. "Look, man. We have been here a few weeks now, and this fourth bedroom situation is just not working out. It is way too small. Fiona is pregnant, her back hurts, and we do not have any room to put the baby things we are starting to buy." I stared at him, my brain trying to process where this was going. "Okay," I said slowly. "So you're telling me you are ready to find your own apartment?" "Because I completely agree. It is too cramped here." Fiona let out a sharp, condescending little laugh. "Oh no, silly. We cannot afford a place yet. You know that." "No, we were looking around the house, and we realized there is a really simple solution." She paused, looking at Cameron for support. He nodded at her. "We think it makes the most sense for us to take the master bedroom," Fiona said, staring me dead in the eyes. "The baby is going to need a lot of space, and your room has that huge walk-in closet. We could easily fit a crib in there. Plus, it has the private bathroom, which I really need right now." I literally lost my ability to speak for a solid 10 seconds. The sheer audacity of the request hit me like a physical blow to the chest. I was paying the massive mortgage on this property. I was paying the property taxes. I was feeding them. And they were sitting at my kitchen island, casually asking me to surrender the one private sanctuary I had left in my own home. "Are you out of your minds?" I finally managed to say, my voice low and shaking with anger. Cameron slammed his hand on the counter. "Watch how you talk to my wife. It is a totally reasonable request. You are a single guy. What do you need a giant master suite for? You could just sleep in the spare room, or put a bed in your office. You barely even use the rest of the house anyway. Reasonable?" I laughed, but there was zero humor in it. It was a dark, bitter sound. "I pay the entire mortgage, Cameron. Every single cent. I pay for the water you shower with, the electricity you use to play video games all day, and the food you eat. I am not giving you my bedroom. That is the end of the conversation." Fiona's face immediately crumpled, and the fake tears started flowing on command. "You are so selfish," she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "We are about to bring a child into this world, and you care more about your stupid closet than your own niece or nephew." I did not care. The guilt trip tactics that had worked on me my entire life suddenly had zero effect. "If you need more space, you can pack your bags tonight and find a motel." I turned around and walked into my master bedroom, locking the heavy wooden door behind me. My heart was pounding out of my chest, but I felt a strange sense of clarity. The line was drawn. If you have never lived in a house during a family Cold War, I cannot adequately describe how suffocating it is. The air actually feels heavy. The morning after I refused to hand over my bedroom, the dynamic shifted from passive-aggressive to actively hostile. My mother, Sylvia, was the general leading the charge. Fiona had obviously gone crying to her the night before, spinning some narrative about how cruel and heartless I was to a poor pregnant woman. Sylvia decided that the best way to break me was through total psychological warfare. She initiated the silent treatment. For the next 3 days, my mother did not say a single word to me. If I walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water, she would completely ignore my presence, turning her back to me and humming loudly. But she made sure to be incredibly loud and affectionate with Cameron and Fiona whenever I was within earshot. I would sit in my office, trying to code, and I would hear her out in the living room. "Oh, Fiona, honey, let me rub your feet. You must be so uncomfortable in that tiny little room. It is just a shame, a real shame how some people can be so greedy when family is in need." She started cooking extravagant meals, but only for the 3 of them. I would smell roasting chicken or baking pies, but when I came out to the kitchen, the leftovers were immediately packed away into Tupperware and shoved to the back of the fridge. It was a pathetic, childish display, designed specifically to make me feel isolated in the house that my own paycheck secured. Cameron took this as a license to be as obnoxious as possible. He started leaving his dirty shoes right outside my bedroom door so I would trip over them. He would turn the television volume up to maximum during my typical working hours. If I confronted him, he would just smirk and say, "Talk to Mom. I am just living here." I was burning the candle at both ends. I was stressed from a heavy workload at my software job, and I was deeply, profoundly depressed by the reality of my family. I realized that my mother did not love me the way she loved Cameron. Her love for me was entirely conditional. It depended completely on my willingness to be useful. The moment I stopped being useful, the moment I established a single boundary, I was treated like an enemy combatant. I spent those days feeling a terrible mixture of rage and profound sadness. You do not just mourn a relationship when someone dies, you mourn it when you realize the version of the family you thought you had was completely fabricated. I had spent 26 years trying to buy their respect, and the Cold War proved that my currency was worthless. By the fourth day of the standoff, my dad, Victor, finally decided to intervene. But if I thought he was going to stand up for me, I was dead wrong. Victor was a man who hated conflict more than he loved justice. His entire survival strategy in his marriage was to keep Sylvia happy, regardless of who had to be sacrificed to achieve that peace. I was out in the garage, trying to organize some tools just to get out of the suffocating atmosphere of the house. Victor shuffled in, holding a cup of coffee, looking everywhere but at me. "Hey, son," he mumbled, leaning against my workbench. "Hey, Dad," I replied, not looking up from the wrench I was wiping down. We stood in silence for a long time. Finally, he sighed. "Listen, Harrison. This whole situation in the house. It is getting out of hand. Your mother is stressed out. Her blood pressure is up. You know how she gets." I stopped what I was doing and looked at him. "My mother is stressed? Dad, I am the one being harassed in my own home because I will not give up my bed." Victor rubbed the back of his neck. "Look, I know it is your house. We all know that. But Cameron is really struggling right now. Fiona is an emotional wreck. They just need a win, Harrison. They need to feel secure. And they need my master bedroom to feel secure?" I asked, the disbelief clear in my voice. "It is not about the room," Victor said, transitioning smoothly into the gaslighting phase. "It is about showing them you support them. You have everything, son. You have the great job, the house, the money. You are successful. Cameron has nothing. When you say no to the room, they do not hear that you want to keep your space. They hear that you think you are better than them." I literally had to grip the edge of the workbench to ground myself. The mental gymnastics were astounding. "Dad, that makes zero sense. I am housing them for free. I am feeding them. How does refusing to sleep on a couch mean I think I am better than them?" "You are just not being a team player," he continued, completely ignoring my logic. "You need to be the bigger man here. Just compromise. Let them have the room until the baby comes. It will make your mother happy. It will bring peace back to the house. Do you not want peace?" I looked at my father, a man who had spent his entire life bending over backward to avoid upsetting my mother. I realized he was asking me to do the exact same thing. He was asking me to set myself on fire just to keep Cameron warm. "Compromise means we meet in the middle, Dad," I said softly, my voice devoid of any warmth. "What you are asking for is not compromise. You are asking for surrender. And I am not doing it. Tell Mom her silent treatment is not going to work." Victor shook his head, looking at me like I was the biggest disappointment of his life. "You are tearing this family apart over a closet, Harrison. I hope you are happy." He turned and walked back into the house, leaving me completely alone in the cold garage. 2 days after that incredibly depressing conversation with my father, I had to go into the corporate office. I usually work from home, but once a quarter, the engineering team has a mandatory in-person strategy meeting downtown. I woke up early, put on a sharp suit, locked my office door because I did not trust Cameron around my servers, and drove into the city. The meeting ran long. I was gone for exactly 4 hours. Just 4 hours. During the drive back home, I felt a strange sense of dread pooling in my stomach. It was an instinct, an animalistic feeling that something was deeply wrong. I pulled into the driveway, grabbed my briefcase, and unlocked the front door. The first thing I noticed was a pile of something near the hallway. I walked closer, my heart starting to hammer against my ribs. It was my clothes. My expensive suits, my casual wear, my shoes. They were not neatly folded. They were literally piled on the hardwood floor of the hallway like garbage waiting for collection. Sitting next to the pile were my two expensive, ultra-wide computer monitors, unplugged and resting dangerously close to the wall. Beside them was a cardboard box filled with my private documents, my colognes, and framed photos that had been sitting on my nightstand. I stopped breathing. The blood rushed to my ears, creating a loud, roaring sound. I dropped my briefcase. It hit the floor with a heavy thud, but I did not care. I sprinted down the hall to the master bedroom. The heavy wooden door was wide open. I walked in and froze. The room had been completely stripped of my existence. My bed sheets were gone. In their place, Fiona was standing next to the bed, humming a pop song while she cheerfully smoothed down a hideous, bright pink floral duvet cover. Several large plastic bins of baby clothes were already stacked inside my walk-in closet. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted. My voice was so loud it actually echoed off the walls. Fiona jumped, dropping a pillow. She spun around, placing a protective hand over her pregnant belly. She did not look guilty. She looked annoyed that I had interrupted her. "Geez, Harrison, do not scream like that. You startled me." I stepped into the room, my hands balling into tight fists at my sides. "I am going to ask you one more time. Why is all of my personal property sitting in a pile of garbage in the hallway? Who gave you the right to touch my things?" Fiona rolled her eyes and let out an exasperated sigh. "Relax. Your mom said we could move in. She said you would not mind moving your stuff into the office, since you are always working anyway. The baby needs the space, Harrison. We are just getting settled." She said it with such casual entitlement, as if she was discussing the weather, not the fact that she had just illegally invaded my private quarters and thrown my belongings onto the floor. I did not waste another second looking at Fiona. The rage I felt was so absolute, so pure, that my vision was literally blurring at the edges. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, my hands shaking uncontrollably, and dialed my mother's number. She was not in the house. I could hear the television in the living room, but no one else was around. She picked up on the third ring. "Hello?" She answered, her voice perfectly calm. "Mom," I growled, not bothering with a greeting. "Did you tell Fiona and Cameron they could move into my bedroom? Did you authorize them to throw my property into the hallway?" There was a pause on the line. A long, guilty hesitation. When she finally spoke, the sweet tone was gone, replaced by a defensive edge. "Now, Harrison, do not overreact. We talked about this. It is the most logical solution. You have the office. You can easily put a futon in there. Fiona needs the private bathroom." I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. I could not believe the level of betrayal. "You planned this," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You waited until I had to go to the office, and you told them to raid my room. In the house that I pay for. It is for the family." Sylvia snapped back, her volume rising. "Why are you being so difficult? It is just a room. You are a single man, you do not need all that space. Stop being so greedy and help your brother." Before I could respond, heavy footsteps thundered down the hallway. Cameron appeared in the doorway of the master bedroom. He puffed out his chest, stepping between me and Fiona like he was some sort of heroic bodyguard protecting his wife from a monster. "Hey," he barked. "Back off, Harrison. My wife is pregnant. You do not talk to her like that, and you do not yell at Mom." I lowered the phone from my ear. I looked Cameron up and down. He was slightly taller than me, but he was soft. He had never worked a hard day in his life, and he had certainly never fought a battle he could not cry his way out of. "You listen to me very carefully, Cameron," I said, taking a deliberate step toward him. "You have exactly 1 hour to get your pink blankets and your baby boxes out of my room. You will pick my clothes up off the floor, and you will put them back exactly where you found them. If you do not, I am going to physically throw your belongings out the front door and onto the street." Cameron scoffed, trying to maintain his tough guy act, but I saw the hesitation in his eyes. "You would not dare. We are family. You cannot kick a pregnant woman out of her room." "It is not her room," I shot back. "It is my room. And my patience is entirely gone." 1 hour. I turned around and walked away. I went straight to my office, walked inside, and locked the door behind me. I sat down in my desk chair, my whole body trembling with adrenaline. They thought they had called my bluff. They thought that because I had always yielded in the past, a bold, physical takeover would force me to accept the new reality. They drastically underestimated how much damage they had done to our relationship. An hour passed. I heard a lot of shuffling, some muted arguing, and the sound of heavy boxes being dragged across the hardwood floor. When I finally emerged from my office, the hallway was clear. My monitors were back on my desk, and my clothes had been haphazardly tossed onto my bed. The pink duvet cover was gone. I had won the battle, but the war was about to escalate to a level I never anticipated. I spent the rest of the afternoon working in my room, ignoring everyone. Around 6 o'clock, I realized I was starving. I had not eaten since breakfast. I walked out to the kitchen, expecting the usual icy silence. The scene in the dining area was perfectly staged. My mother had cooked a massive, beautiful dinner. There was a roasted pot roast, mashed potatoes, fresh green beans, and warm dinner rolls. The smell was incredible. Victor was sitting at the head of the table. Cameron and Fiona were seated on one side. Sylvia was just bringing the final dish to the table. I walked over to the cabinet to grab a plate. I was still angry, but I had paid for the $300 worth of groceries earlier that week, and I was going to eat the food I bought. As I reached for the cabinet handle, Sylvia spoke. Her voice was ice cold, completely devoid of any maternal warmth. "Do not bother, Harrison." I stopped, my hand hovering in the air. I turned to look at her. "What did you say?" Sylvia calmly sat down in her chair, picked up her napkin, and placed it on her lap. I said, "Do not bother getting a plate. There is no food for you here." I looked at the table. There was a massive roast sitting right in the middle, easily enough to feed 6 people. Then I looked at the place settings. There were exactly 4 plates. 4 forks. 4 glasses of water. I stared at her, feeling a bizarre mix of shock and morbid fascination. "Are you seriously refusing to let me eat the food that I bought with my own money?" Sylvia did not even look at me. She picked up the serving spoon and began placing a generous portion of meat onto Cameron's plate. "If you do not want to act like a member of this family," she said casually, as if she were reciting a universal law of nature, "then you do not get to eat with the family. You want to be a selfish landlord who hoards his big bedroom? Fine. But landlords do not get home-cooked meals. Figure it out yourself." I looked at my father. Victor was staring intently at his mashed potatoes, refusing to intervene. I looked at Cameron. He had a triumphant, mocking smirk on his face. Fiona actually let out a tiny, high-pitched giggle and quickly covered her mouth. They thought this was a brilliant punishment. They thought starving me out and humiliating me would break my spirit and force me to apologize, to hand over the bedroom just to be allowed back into the warmth of the family circle. They were wrong. That empty plate was the greatest gift my mother could have ever given me. It severed the very last string of guilt I was holding onto. The emotional bankruptcy was complete. I felt absolutely nothing for these people anymore. They were no longer my parents or my brother. They were hostile parasites. I did not yell. I did not argue. I just smiled. A cold, dead smile. "Okay," I said quietly. "Enjoy your dinner." I turned around, walked away from the table, and headed straight back to my office. The time for arguing was over. It was time for paperwork. I sat down at my dual monitor setup. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by a terrifyingly calm, absolute focus. If my mother wanted to call me a selfish landlord, then I was going to be the most efficient, legally protected landlord in the city. I opened a web browser and pulled up the official state laws regarding tenancy and eviction. Because I am a software engineer, I am extremely meticulous when it comes to rules and logic. I read through the statutes carefully, making sure I did not make a single emotional mistake that could be weaponized against me later. The law was very clear, and it dictated two very different approaches for the parasites living in my house. First, there was Victor and Sylvia. They had been living in my house for over a year. Even though they did not pay rent, the duration of their stay legally classified them as month-to-month tenants. I could not just throw them out onto the street overnight. That would be an illegal self-help eviction, and I could be sued. To remove them legally, I needed to provide a formal 30-day notice to vacate. I found a boilerplate legal template online, filled in my parents' full legal names, the property address, and the exact date they were required to surrender the premises. I printed 2 copies. Then I moved on to Cameron and Fiona. Their legal standing was entirely different. They had only been in the house for about 3 weeks. They paid no bills, they had no lease, and their primary residence was technically still listed in their old town. Under state law, they were not tenants. They were classified as guests. And when a property owner revokes permission for a guest to be on the premises, they become trespassers. I drafted a brutal, uncompromising document. It was a 24-hour notice to quit. In bold, formal language, I stated that their status as guests was immediately revoked. I gave them exactly 24 hours to remove their persons and all personal property from the premises. I included a very clear final sentence. Failure to vacate by the specified time will result in local law enforcement being contacted to remove you for criminal trespassing. I hit print. The laser printer whirred to life, spitting out the crisp, white pages of legal ruin. I grabbed a pen, signed the bottom of all the documents, and organized them into 2 neat folders. I did not feel sad. I did not feel conflicted. I felt like a surgeon removing a necrotic tumor that was threatening to kill the host. I picked up the folders, walked out of my office, and headed back down the hallway. They were still at the dining table. They had finished eating and were laughing about something on the television. The atmosphere was light, victorious. They genuinely believed they had put me in my place. I walked into the room, my footsteps heavy. The laughter died down as I approached the table. I did not say a word at first. I just stopped at the head of the table, looking down at the 4 of them. Then I lifted the first folder and dropped it directly onto Victor and Sylvia's plates. The paper landed with a soft smack. "What is this?" Sylvia asked, her brow furrowing in confusion. She reached out and opened the folder, scanning the bold legal text. Her eyes widened, and the color instantly drained from her face. "Harrison, what is an eviction notice?" Before she could finish processing it, I dropped the second folder directly in front of Cameron. "That is a 30-day notice for Mom and Dad," I said, my voice completely flat and devoid of any emotion. "You have 30 days to find a new place to live. Do not ask for an extension, because you will not get one." I turned my eyes to Cameron. He was staring at his document, his mouth hanging open slightly. "And that, Cameron, is a 24-hour notice to quit. You and Fiona are legally classified as guests. Your invitation is revoked. You have until tomorrow evening to pack everything you brought into this house and leave. If you are still on my property at 6 p.m. tomorrow, I will call the police, show them the deed to the house, and have you both physically removed for trespassing." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of silence that rings in your ears. Cameron jumped up so fast his chair crashed backward onto the floor. "You cannot do this," he screamed, his face turning an ugly shade of red. "We are family. You cannot kick a pregnant woman out onto the street." I did not flinch. I did not step back. I looked right through him. "You are not my family, Cameron. You are a parasite. You tried to steal my room. You eat my food. You disrespect me in my own home. You have 24 hours. Fiona burst into actual, hysterical tears, clutching her stomach. Sylvia started to cry too, reaching out for my hand. "Harrison, please. We were just trying to help your brother. I am sorry about the dinner, I am sorry. Please do not do this to us." I pulled my hand away from her grasp. "You made your choice, Mom. You chose him over me your entire life. You chose him yesterday, you chose him tonight at dinner. Now, you can go live with him." I did not wait for a response. I turned my back on them, walked into my master bedroom, and locked the door. For the first time in weeks, I slept incredibly well. The next morning, I woke up early. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat by the front window. The house was moving. I could hear the frantic, panicked sounds of packing coming from the fourth bedroom. There was no yelling, no arguing. Just the sound of tape ripping and heavy boxes being dragged. They knew I was not bluffing. The legal documents had shattered their delusion of control. Around noon, Cameron and Fiona began carrying their things out to their car. I watched them from the window. They looked exhausted and humiliated. They had nowhere to go except a cheap motel, paying out of their own pockets for the first time in a month. Fiona did not look smug anymore. Cameron did not puff out his chest. They loaded the last box, got into their car, and drove away. They did not say goodbye. I did not expect them to. Later that afternoon, Sylvia knocked softly on my bedroom door. I opened it. She looked 10 years older than she had the night before. Her eyes were red and swollen. "They are gone," she whispered, looking at the floor. "I know," I replied. "Harrison," she started, her voice trembling. "I did not realize. I did not know how much we were hurting you. We will change. We will pay rent. Please, do not make your father and me move out at our age." I looked at the woman who had happily denied me a plate of food less than 24 hours ago just to assert dominance. The apology was not real. It was born of desperation, not remorse. If I let them stay, the cycle would just repeat. The emotional bankruptcy was permanent. "I am sorry, Mom," I said quietly. "But the 30-day notice stands. You need to start looking for an apartment." I closed the door before she could start crying again. I locked it, leaned against the heavy wood, and let out a long, slow breath. The house was finally quiet. It was a heavy, lonely silence, but it was mine. I had lost my entire family, but I had finally bought back my own self-respect. So, that is where things stand. The house is quiet now, but the silence is heavy. Some of my extended family members have caught wind of the story and are calling me a monster for putting a pregnant woman out on the street and evicting my own parents. But I ask you, am I wrong for finally protecting my own space in the house I pay for? Should I have just sucked it up, slept in my office, and let them take over for the sake of family? Let me know your verdict in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. If you have not subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another story. If you enjoyed this one, dropping a like really helps the channel out. See you in the next video.